Today we're also going to look at applications of systems of equations. Here are some tips to remember when you're working on applications and having to write your own equations. First, make sure that you define your variables. This means you're going to pick a variable for each unknown and you're going to write what it stands for. So for instance, if I were trying to find the number of dogs, let's say, I might use the variable d, and I would state that d stands for the number of dogs. So I know what that variable represents in my equation, and later when I solve, I know what it stands for. Second, it's important to remember that if you have two unknowns, where you're going to need two variables, the only way that you can solve for those is to have two separate equations. Always remember to check your answer in both equations to make sure it works. If it only works in one of them, then it's not the correct answer and you need to go back and revisit your equations and your solution. In our first example, it says, at the county fair, John buys food for his family. He purchases 3 hot dogs and 5 cheeseburgers, and it costs him $21. Scott also buys food for his family. He purchases 6 hot dogs, 4 cheeseburgers, and it cost him $24. We want to know how much does a hot dog cost, so we don't know that, and how much does a cheeseburger cost, so we also don't know that. So I'm going to start by defining my variables. So I'm going to use H to represent the cost of a hot dog. So this is going to be in dollars. That's going to be my unit. I'm going to need that at the end. And then I'm going to use C to represent the cost of a cheeseburger. And again, my units here will be dollars. I'm going to need my units at the end for my final answer. So if you look at the first statement, where John buys 3 hot dogs and 5 cheeseburgers for $21, that actually gives us an equation. We know that 3 times the cost of a hot dog plus 5 times the cost of a cheeseburger, because he bought 3 hot dogs and 5 cheeseburgers, we know that that total cost is $21. And remember, when we're looking for a total or a sum, we're using addition. So the second statement is actually very similar. Scott purchases 6 hot dogs, so 6 times the cost of a hot dog, plus 4 cheeseburgers, so 4 times the cost of a cheeseburger, and all together that cost $24. So these are the two equations we're going to use to solve our system. So to start solving, I've just copied the equations over here that we just wrote. And if you'll notice, both of these are in standard form and we have no coefficient of 1. So we're going to want to go ahead and use elimination. So I'm just going to make my h's the same because I just need to make the top one a -6. So I'm going to go through and multiply everything here by a -2. So I'll rewrite that one over here. So -6h minus 10c is equal to -42. And then my bottom equation, remember, already has the positive 6h that I want, so I don't actually need to do anything except rewrite that one. So now I can go ahead and add those two equations together. So we can see that our h's, the -6 and the positive 6 will cancel. -10 plus 4c is -6c, and then -42 plus 24 is -18. So now to figure out c, we need to just divide both sides by -6, and we see that c is equal to 3. So now we're going to go back and figure out h, so we can again plug it into either equation. I'll just use the first one here. So we're going to have 3h plus 5 times c, which we just found to be 3, is equal to 21. So 3h plus 15 is equal to 21. We'll go ahead and move that 15 over. 3h is equal to 6, which means h is equal to 2. So what this tells us, and because this is an application, we're not going to write it as an ordered pair like we have been. This tells us that a hot dog is $2, because remember that's what we were finding. We wrote our units on the other page. And a cheeseburger cost $3. So this is our solution to our system. And if we went back and we plugged it into both equations, so does 3 hot dogs and 5 cheeseburgers cost $21 if hot dogs are $2 and cheeseburgers are $3? And then does 6 hot dogs plus 4 cheeseburgers equal $24? Again, if hot dogs are $2 and cheeseburgers are $3. Our next example is going to be a little bit different, but again, we're going to have 2 unknowns and we're going to need 2 equations. So in the first statement, Sam places an order of t-shirts and sweatshirts for the math club. He buys a total of 15 items and he spends $232. What we know is that t-shirts cost $12 and sweatshirts cost $25. What we don't know is how many of each one he bought. Okay, so we're going to start by defining our variables. T is going to be the number of t-shirts. And S will be the number of sweatshirts. So we know 2 things here. We know how many items he bought, and we know how much he spent. So those are going to be our 2 separate equations. So we know that altogether, total, which remember means addition, he bought 15 items. So the number of t-shirts plus the number of sweatshirts has to be 15 because that's what he bought. The second thing we know is how much he spent. So we know that he spent $232. So he spent $12 on every t-shirt. So 12 times however many t-shirts he bought. And he spent $25 on every sweatshirt. So 25 times the number of sweatshirts he bought. So we have an equation right here for the number of items, because that's one thing that we knew, and another one for the total cost, which is the other piece of information we were given. Now we can use these 2 equations to solve. So here are our 2 equations from the other page. If you'll notice, my first equation has 2 variables with a coefficient of 1. So I'm going to use substitution this time. It doesn't actually matter what I solve for, so I'm just going to go ahead and solve this one for t by moving the s over. So t is equal to negative s plus 15. And then remember, I can go down to the second equation, and I can replace t, only t, with that negative s plus 15. So 12 times negative s plus 15 plus 25s is equal to 232. Now I'm going to go ahead and distribute the 12 to everything. So negative 12s plus 180 plus 25s is equal to 232. I'm going to simplify here by combining my variables. So 13s plus 180 is equal to 232. Now I'll move the 180 over, so 13s is equal to 52. So if I divide both sides by 13, we get that s is 4. So now we just need t. Remember, it's easiest to go back and plug it into this equation that we solved for t. So t is equal to negative s, so negative 4 plus 15, which is 11. So what this tells us, again, we're not going to write it as an ordered pair because it's an application, that he bought 4 sweatshirts and 11 t-shirts. So we can see that all together from our first equation, he did buy a total of 15 items, and then we can check to see if the costs work. So if each t-shirt is $12, we would do 12 times the number of t-shirts to get that cost, and then $25 times the number of sweatshirts, and then all together, does that equal 232? And it does. In this last example, we're going to look at comparing two different costs to find out when they're equal. We could also do this to find out when one is going to be more advantageous than the other. So a local yoga studio offers 2 memberships for college students. The first option is that students can pay $50 per month plus $5 per visit. The second option instead is that they could pay $20 per month plus $10 per visit. So what these two statements are giving us is the cost. So the cost for option 1 is to pay $50 every month plus $5 per visit. So I'm going to say V is equal to the number of visits. The second one, so the cost of the second membership, is only $20 per month, but it's $10 per visit. And what we want to know is when these two costs are equal to each other. So when is 50 plus 5V equal to 20 plus 10V? So again, here are our two cost equations. And what we're really doing here is using substitution. We can go to the second equation since C is already solved for in the first one. We can replace this C with 5V plus 50, or 50 plus 5V. I just wrote them in slope-intercept form. So 5V plus 50 is equal to 10V plus 20. So let's get our variables on one side by moving the 5V over. So 10V minus 5V is 5V. We still have the plus 20. Then we'll go ahead and move the 20 over. So 30 is equal to 5V. Divide both sides by 5. And we can see that V is equal to 6. So it would take 6 visits for the cost of those two memberships to be exactly the same.